Hannah. Do you know what is stupid about places that are cold? They always overheat buildings. So you're outside and you're cold, and then you go in the building and you're like, oh, it's warm. And then about 5 minutes later, you're like, why am I in here and it is so hot? Dear Somalian pen pal, you're so lucky you live in a place without indoor heating or air conditioning. It's like way too hot inside. Love, Caety. Okay, but now that that little mini rant's done, today I'm going to talk about things I've been learning in my social class because I have nothing else to talk about, so hopefully you find this interesting. I do. Basically, I'm going to go over 2 experiments we read about in Soc, and they were from the 50s and 60s, which was a less ethical time. The experiments had a tendency to really affect the subjects and deceive them, and that's now kind of frowned upon, but at the time, it helped us learn a heck of a lot. So, okay, the first one was on obedience and social pressure. Basically, what they did for this one was they had people come in, telling them they were coming in for a test in human perception, and they showed them squares with lines on them. So you'd have one line that would be like this size, and you'd have another line that would be like this size, and then you'd have another line that'd be like this size, and then you'd have one line over here, and you'd be like, which of these matches this? And it was pretty obvious that it was this one. And so people were basically doing those experiments. And that's what they thought they were there for. But what actually they did was they had a group of various numbers of people, and every single person in that group knew what was really going on except for one person. So that one person was really the test subject. And so what happened is for the first couple rounds, everyone, said the same thing because the answer was really obvious. And then one round, everyone would say the totally wrong answer except for that last person, the person that didn't know what was going on. And so the idea was to test how that person was affected just based off what everyone else said, kind of like peer pressure. And so what they found was that a good number of people were affected. Quoth the article, of the 123 put to the test, a considerable percentage yielded to the majority, whereas in ordinary circumstances of individuals matching the lines will make mistakes less than 1% of the time. Under group pressure, the minority subjects swung to acceptance of the misleading majority's wrong judgments in 36.8% of those selections. So that's going from 1% of the time people getting this wrong to 36.8% of the time people getting this wrong. Clearly, it's because of social pressure. However, what was interesting was that if you had just one more person in this crowd saying the right answer, then suddenly the subject would be much more willing to say the correct answer. So what this basically means is that, in situations where something is just very wrong, like let's say no one's gonna give Caety chocolate. That is a wrong situation, Hannah. People should always give Caety chocolate. So if people don't give Caety chocolate, and you know this is wrong, Hannah, but no one's saying anything and everyone's saying this is the correct thing to do, if you stand up and go, I think Caety should get chocolate, there's a good chance that suddenly a lot of people will agree with you. Because people that think that actually you're right, but we're just giving in to peer pressure, will be like, wait, I'm gonna answer incorrectly here only 1/4 as much of the time. So I'm probably going to answer correctly now, and Caety should get chocolate. I want chocolate. So that experiment makes me go, yay for humans, because we may give in to peer pressure easily, but as soon as one person is willing to rebel, other people are. So that's good, because that means people are willing to actually look at what's right, assuming one other person is. This next experiment makes me horrified of humans completely. Okay, so basically 2 dudes specifically, came into this research institution at Yale, and they thought they were signing up for a program, an experiment on teaching people learning and memorization, all that jazz. And so they thought that randomly chosen, one of them ended up being a teacher, one of them ended up being a student. But really, the whole thing was rigged, so the student was the same person every time because they were trained to give very specific answers and react specific ways. But the teacher thought this was rigged, and so the teacher goes into this room, and what they're supposed to do is read off these list of words. The student's supposed to read them back and memorize them. And the teacher, every time the student makes a mistake, is supposed to shock the student. And there's a little shocking board, and so they're supposed to shock the student. And the next time the student gets a mistake, up the shock and shock the student. Next time the student, so you basically increase by increments. And the shock board goes all the way from barely shock to extreme danger shock. I don't know what it was actually labeled as, but it was really literally something like extreme danger. And so the friends of the dudes running this experiment were like, dude, people aren't gonna shock people that much. They're gonna stop around, very strong shock. They're not gonna go any higher than that. They're certainly not gonna go higher once the student starts, crying out in pain. But what was found was that people actually, out of the 30-ish participants. Let's see here. 30 out of the 40 participants, 26 obeyed fully. That means they took it up to the extreme shock danger level, and they kept going even once the student had started calling out for help and for the person to stop, and then eventually just stopped talking altogether. Whereas 14 broke off the experiment early, which is terrifying. And no one broke off the experiment before the person started calling out. And the only thing keeping these people, and the people that kept it going the whole time, they were horribly upset by keeping it going the whole time. 2 of them had seizures, they were so upset. But the only reason they kept going was because there was this one experimenter dude in the room that would prod them, being like, you need to finish the experiment. It's necessary you finish the experiment. But it's like, they had already been paid. So the money was not involved too. They were getting paid whether or not they completed the experiment. And they had no real incentive to keep this experiment going. They were just obeying the person. And apparently our powers of obeying people are so strong that we're willing to hurt others. I mean, that definitely explains the whole Nazi thing, but it's a little freaky. Basically, humans are both awesome and horrible. I hope you enjoyed that and found that interesting. I love you, bye!